My family and I moved to Paris, Ontario in 1991. My wife and I had both been attracted to the small town for years, having first noticed it while taking the train from Toronto to London. Paris was full of small town atmosphere, with fine old homes and buildings perched on hills around the junction of the Grand and Nith rivers. When we moved to Paris in 1991, no new homes had been built in quite some time. Our house, for example, was built in 1899. Here are a couple of other, even older houses built in the mid-1800s. The most recent burst of new home construction in Paris had been after the Second World War, mostly relatively modest, small, single-family homes built in the southern and northwest corners of the town. Here's one example. About 5 years after we moved to Paris, the first new home construction in many years began in the South End. They employed designs generally similar to those of previous years. After this mini boom of home building, Paris saw little more housing development until 2017, when the provincial government created the green belts that restricted new suburban developments in the Greater Toronto area. Paris, Ontario lay outside of the green zone, but still within commuting distance of major urban centers like Kitchener-Waterloo and Hamilton, so it became a key target for developers. The result was an explosion in housing development, with hundreds of houses built in only 4 years. Here is a satellite view of Paris taken in 2001. Here is a satellite view of Paris taken in 2020. Note the dramatically increased number of paved roads, especially in the south and north ends of the town. These new houses are of a very different character. Here's a typical example. These houses vary little in design from their neighbors, have much smaller lots, and little greenery. The majority of the population of Paris now lives in these generic, cramped, and in my opinion, dreary buildings. As I looked through these images, I noticed a pattern. The houses built in the 1800s do not have garages. They might have stables, but otherwise there is no concession to housing transportation of any kind. The houses constructed in the mid-1900s sometimes have detached garages added after the house was built. It's not until the housing development of the 1990s that we start to see every new house built with an attached garage. And of course, every new house built since 2017 has at least one attached garage, and often 2 or even 3 attached garages. As you can imagine, traffic in Paris, especially in the old town core, has become a nightmare. For 25 years after we moved to Paris, this was what traffic was typically like. This is what it is like now, every weekday at 5 p.m. and all afternoon on the weekends. After taking and examining all these photos, I can see now that the traffic growth will likely be so severe over the next 50 years as to make the vision of mandatory leisure time impossible to implement. The only solution will be to ban vehicular traffic entirely within Paris. This will make an app that helps people plan their activities and movements around the town even more essential. However, just because people won't be able to drive in Paris anymore doesn't mean we can't take advantage of the skills they have learned finding and driving to their favorite leisure activities. Car drivers have been using apps like Google Maps for years, an app that helps them find or walk or bicycle to a center of leisure activity should use the same type of conceptual model and the same type of features. Here is a low-fidelity prototype of a screen in such an app. Here, the user can tap one of the leisure activity type buttons on the right of the screen, and the app will display not only the locations of places that offer leisure activities of that type, but their current level of usage as well. For example, in this image, Juniper Dining Company, a restaurant, is currently hosting 90% of the total number of diners it is allowed to serve. The app extends existing mapping technology to add layers specifically designed to help users integrate more leisure activities into their daily lives.